Hi, I'm Lily, and almost a month ago I decided to join my very first game jam. A scary thought actually, but I wanted to see if it was possible for me to complete a very simple game in a relatively short amount of time. Godover 25's premier game jam has the theme My Body Hurts, and I wanted to make something that can make people smile, so my plan was to create a doctor's office on an unknown planet where aliens come in with the most unhinged issues. I really tried to keep the list of core mechanics as short as possible for this project. The core idea was, a patient shows up, you see the information, a picture of the injury, and you hear the explanation of what happened, and after this, you get to choose the potentially best alternative for the patient. While the days pass by and you try to avoid bad choices and with them warnings that can get you fired. But of course, quite early in the development, I decided to go a little overboard and add settings. Initially, I had plans for multiple settings, but in the end, I only kept language and difficulty. Difficulty only changes the amount of warnings you can have, while language means that from this point forward, I will be translating every single piece of text into 4 different languages. All to make sure that people close to me all will be able to enjoy the game without any language barriers. Even though I have no idea how to animate anything, I initially wanted all patients to tell their own story of how they got hurt during a short animation. I quickly realized this would not be possible, so I went for plan B, and I tried drawing a few pictures in Krita. And then I realized this would not be possible either. Instead, I went to plan C, where I spent roughly 25 active hours drawing a total of 25 patients with pen and paper, then scanned them in and colored them on the computer. Originally, I wanted to have at least 40 patients, but I decided that 25 will have to be enough for this project. This was really the trust the process part of this project, because it's safe to say that I was worried about how it all would look in the end. But giving them color was so fun, and then seeing the first one in the office, ooh, that made me smile. I gave the office a small visual update as well before adding all patients in. After more than 80 hours on this project, and adding music, I suddenly started having a bug that made the game unplayable. Not on all, but on some patients, I would get 3 warnings when choosing an alternative. I went through the code, all code that had been added in the last few days before this, and it was identical between patient that worked as intended and patients that gave instant game over. I started thinking that perhaps it was the buttons themselves that, for some reason, were linked to each other. But I could not find the problem, and therefore not a solution. And it made absolutely no sense why it worked so well on some patients while others were not working at all. This specific bug had me banging my head against the wall for so long. Looking back, it feels crazy. But sitting there and feeling like I was drowning in self-doubt, I was strongly considering to delete Godot and never try coding again. Like, what was I even doing? Like, why would I even think that I could do this? But I spent 4 hours spread out over 2 days, desperately trying to find the issue before I eventually solved it. And what was the problem, you might ask? Well, the problem was me, of course. To fix another bug, where symptom bubbles were still visible if you moved too fast, I had added a safety feature that hides everything in certain situations. However, I modified this function pretty badly because I used a shortcut instead of fixing it completely. Bad idea. And then I decided to throw the same function in as a safety feature when pressing alternatives. It was a good idea, if I had only gone over the code one extra time, because inside the function was another function, and inside that function was a third function, and inside that one, basically, alternative 3 was treated as being pressed. And for the patients where alternative 3 actually means that you should get a warning, it essentially multiplied and suddenly you lost your job while helping your first patient. When the game finally, again, worked as it was supposed to, I started adding some floof. My thought is that if you start a new job somewhere, you would want to make it feel a little bit more like home. So for every day you finish in this game, something new gets added into the office, at least for a while. Then I felt ready to upload the project to itch.io. But then I found a huge issue. Because no matter what I did, it was not possible for the game to run in any other size than 1920 x 1080. And to have that size embedded in the browser was just not a possibility. And I thought this was because I had initially set the project to be 1920 x 1080, and that it for some reason was not possible to resize a project into a smaller size when exporting. In the end, I admitted defeat and decided to make a copy of the entire game and then planned to go through the painstaking process of resizing the project and update the scenes one by one to have everything be in the right position again. After only 2 scenes, I decided to export just to verify that this would actually solve the problem. And it did not. No matter what settings I used, it would always be shown as 1920 x 1080. But then I realized that when starting the game, one of my global scripts, that by itself it's not connected to anything visual, had a size. Specifically the size 1920 x 1080. Something that makes absolutely no sense, at least until you look inside the script. Do you remember how I mentioned in the beginning that I had plans for many more settings than just the 2 that I kept? Well, I did not remember this specific fact, but I had not seen this code for a couple of weeks by this time. I had completely forgotten the existence of this code. But since this clearly say that on startup, the game should be forced to 1920 x 1080, that's what it kept doing. Well, at least I know this code is working. Hiding this and once again using the window override settings, suddenly it was possible to upload the damn game. And not only that, I can now both have it embedded on the page as well as having the option to play it in full screen. Oh man, the relief when it was finally uploaded. It's hard to put words to that. But all things considering, I'm very happy that I joined the Game Jam. I have learned so much. Mainly, don't give up. And now I'm ready to go back to Curious Calvin and start to handle some of the feedback I've gotten during the playtest. But also, I really want to start another side project. Not sure how to balance that, but I'm sure I will tell you in the next devlog. And if you want to properly be a part of the journey, consider joining the Discord server where I update much more frequently than I do on YouTube. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye!